Kevin Lembo is the state's healthcare advocate. He became the state's first healthcare advocate about a decade ago. But before that, he worked under Nancy Wyman as the assistant comptroller. Now he's running to be the comptroller. Kevin, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Lori. Good to be here.
And Pat, of course, is joining us again. Pat, thanks for sticking around.
Good to see you.
Kevin, if you could talk to us. Yeah, I mean, the big thing that everybody remembers, or the first thing that they remember, is the whole nerd campaign thing. What is that all about?
Well, of all the things you can be called in life, being called a nerd is now, not so bad after all.
I know. It's kind
when
of
you're
cheap.
in fifth grade, it's the worst thing that could happen. So, that came out of actually a Colin McEnroe column that appeared in the Hartford Courant that talked about my policy work and how much I love sort of digging down on those policy issues. And he called me a nerd, so we owned that, and proudly so. So I think we need more nerds in politics, frankly.
Right, and if you're digging in, talk about the things that you think are important to dig into if you're going to become the comptroller.
Well, it's an important question. We've got a $3.5 billion budget deficit when we walk in the door January 5th, and that's going to take a lot of work to look at the spending that occurs in state government and try to wrangle that and bring it under control. Take a look at our borrowing, take a look at how state agencies are structured. The comptroller not only pays the bills and does the payroll and buys health care and does all of those things, but the comptroller has broad auditing authority within these state agencies to look at contracts and accounts, and we're going to need to use that authority to dig down and root out waste and really get to work.
Right.
Now, as far as the nerd thing working for you, if you ever want to change it, I was thinking of maybe K-Lem. Does that work?
Sure.
You talk about, and your opponent has also talked about playing a role in keeping down spending, borrowing, et cetera. But is there a statutory role for comptroller in the process, in the budgetary process?
It's an important question, Pat, because I think when you listen to many of the candidates that are running for statewide office, you'll hear them say things that they want to do that are clearly outside the purview of their office, right?
Yeah, we hear that a lot.
You have to start to wonder, well, how are you going to accomplish that? So the comptroller has a seat on the bond commission. So in that way, you have direct impact on the borrowing side of the state budget. But in addition to that, and perhaps more importantly, you have a bully pulpit as a constitutional officer who's the state's fiscal guardian, the fiscal watchdog, the person who speaks directly to the people about where the budget is. So as Nancy Wyman has done in her 16 years as comptroller, and I hope to put my own brand on that office, you stand up and you call out budget practices that are not in the best interest of the people of the state. And it's not always an easy situation to be in. Mm-hmm. So one of the criteria, I hope, as folks go to vote on November 2nd, is that they think long and hard about who has stood up and taken stands when it's been difficult. And I think I've done that, not only in our fights with the insurance industry, but fighting with Connecticut's government, frankly, fighting with the Congress, and actually picked a fight with my president right after he was inaugurated and Barack Obama was in the White House over a policy issue that I thought would hurt the people of Connecticut, and we needed to change it.
Tell us more about that.
Well, mental health parity was part of that, and part of the way the federal health care reform bill was being designed had the potential to undermine some of the good things we have going on in Connecticut, so we needed them to back away from that. Granted, they were trying to pass law that would have helped all of the states, but in an effort to bring up all the states, they ended up pushing states that had been innovative in the past, like Connecticut, down, and we didn't want that to happen. So you always want the feds to create a federal floor and not a ceiling. You want to give us room to innovate above the floor and not punish those who have been ahead of the game.
Right.
Well, in many of these races, we have seen a person with governmental experience against a businessman touting his business experience.
Sure.
The same is true in your race. Jack Ortruly, the Republican, has made much of his business experience. How do you match up experience against experience, and is it a drawback that he has more private sector experience?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is I hope in this election that a credential and experience on the government side actually matter for something, because it's a complicated specialty, not unlike business is a complicated specialty unto itself. It's a problem, I think, however, that that someone can just claim they're a businessman, and somehow that gives them carte blanche to do whatever they want to do. It's like lawyers who think they're doctors and doctors who think they're lawyers. So we need to sort of look at the business credential of those who are coming forward as business leaders to help to run our government. So, for example, in government, we're going to have a $3.5 billion budget deficit next year. It's going to be a painful process to close that. There are going to be cuts in the budget, and there's going to be a very contentious time with the legislature as we figure out how to do that. We don't have the luxury in government of hitting the bankruptcy reset button caution that folks in business do. We can't walk away from our vendors on 25 cents on a dollar. We can't do that. We can't offshore the production of license plates to China because it's less expensive to do it there. There are things that government does that we have to do here. We can't walk away from bridge maintenance because it's not a profit center. So they're slightly different. I have a master's in public administration. My opponent has a master's in business administration. I'm trained to run governments. It's what I do.
Interesting. I know that you work for Nancy Wyman, but are there things that you can be critical of about what she's done?
Oh, absolutely. Look, you don't always agree with your friends.
Yeah.
And that's going to be important as well. I hope that Dan Malloy will also be elected the governor. And just because we share a party doesn't mean we're going to agree all the time. So I had a great experience working with Nancy Wyman, learned a lot about the budget, learned a lot about keeping your word and things that are really critical in this business. But in addition to that, there were things that I wish she had done. So I would want to take a more aggressive position on borrowing in the state and really dig down on some of those bond agenda items that are there and make sure that it's appropriate to be borrowing for those things in the first place. You don't put groceries on your credit card unless you absolutely have to, and Connecticut has been doing that for a very long time. So I think there's a sort of slight difference of opinion there. I'd like to take some of the transparency efforts that Nancy began with the bond allocation database and searchable search engines on bonding and extend that to all contracts and to the entire state budget so that people and our proxies in the media and academics can help analyze what's going on in the state, and we can really make sure that we're getting what we're buying with our tax dollar. We've got to squeeze it. These are very difficult times, and they're going to require very difficult decisions.
We have a gubernatorial race, of course, and a U.S. Senate race going on all at once. You feeling a little overshadowed in your race?
Well, you have to really check your ego at the door. There's not many folks except my immediate family that are coming with the intention of voting line 8B for comptroller. But once you get past that, you realize it's important. We need to focus at the top of the ticket. We have a gubernatorial and Senate race, as you point out, that are critical. But I think the Democrats have presented a very balanced and experienced team of people ready to hit the ground running and do the hard work that's necessary. We don't have to learn the lay of the land. We know what it is, and we know where the bodies are buried, frankly.
Right. All right. Thanks a lot. Kevin Lembo, he is running, and he wants your vote. So coming up next, Susan Beisowitz is here. If you're not registered, she's going to tell you how to be.